Hi, in this video we are going to see how we can create a MUnit test case. So MUnit is nothing but it's a unit testing framework from MuleSoft. Using that we can test our integration. So why this unit testing is very important is whenever you develop, you just consider for creating a test script as well or test suite as well, so that you can test your integration. And in integration we will keep on creating more integration in the same platform. So it's better to create always one test case, or how many test cases you require for integration, you just create it, so that in future if you wanted to do any regression testing for your API when there is a changes or any changes in your integration, if you wanted to re-execute the test case, then it's not you don't need to do a manual test. So it's already there, you can run it and you can see the output as well. And also you can invoke it from the external CI/CD tool, so that it will be automatically tested before your deployment. So now today we are going to see a demo. I'll create a some sample Mule application project, and we'll see how we can test that from the MUnit testing framework. Let's get into the demo now. So first, in order to test that, we need some applications. So I'll just create a quick simple application. I'll just go and create a Mule project, and I'll say test Mule app. Okay, so I'll just create a test Mule app. I'll click finish. So in this particular Mule project, I'm going to start with the HTTP listener. I'll just add that, and what I'm going to do is I'll just go and add two numbers using some external SOAP service. So I'll just give my endpoint as add, and I'm going to receive a request via HTTP listener. So I'll just give the default port. So I'm going to receive a request here, and once I receive a request, I'm going to pass two variables, number one and number two, which I'm going to get it from the query parameter, and finally I'm going to call some SOAP service to add two numbers. So in order to get the variable from my query parameter, I'll add the set variable first, and I'll add one more. This set variable, I'll just take the values from the query parameter. I'll just say my variable name is number one. I'll just say change this to expression mode for the data wave operators attributes, and I'm going to take it from query params, and I'm going to take it from some field called number one. So whatever number one value, I'm going to store it in this number one variable, and I'm going to take similarly, I'm going to take some number two variable from the query parameter, and I'm going to store it in the number two variable. Okay, so now I have extracted the variable, and this one it will be a data wave expression. Yeah, so now we have extracted the variable from the query parameter. I'll just quickly call the web service consumer. So we are going to call some SOAP based web service to give a add. Okay, so I'll just adding that consume here. So in order to call SOAP based web service, we need to give a connector detail. So I'll just take some sample web service Vistal, because we need a SOAP URL. I'll just take it something from the online. I'll take this working with Vistal SOAP UI.website. I'll take this calculator Vistal. So it has a method, or it has an operation add, divide and multiply and subtract. For our demo, we are going to use simply add. I'll just call the provide a Vistal location here, and I'll just refresh it here, so that whatever the Vistal service, it will appear here automatically, calculator. And then I'll just select version, SOAP version. I'll just select SOAP, calculator SOAP, address. Yeah, so it automatically appear here once we select that. So address is also coming here. I'll give OK. Now we have two variables, number one, number two, which we need to map it to this consume operation, and I'll add a transform message to do the mapping. So I'll add a transform message here, because this consume operation expect a input in specific format, right? So I have added this transform message. I'll save this one. I'm going to consume. Yeah, so we have to configure this these detail first. So I have configured the web service consumer config, where we have given a Vistal detail. Operation, you just select here add. I'm going to use a add operation, and I'll save it. And once you select the add option, you come to the transform message. Then it will show what is the input it's required for add methods. If you see here, there's an add operation. It is expecting a field int A, int B. Okay, so this is the field we have written a variable, which I'll map it to int A, and number two I'll map it to int B. So now we have done the mapping. So now once we are receiving a request parameter from the query parameter, and then which we are setting in a variable, and we are mapping to the web service input, and we are going to call a web service, which is going to give some result. Okay, so our result will be in a response format, which I will show it here. I'll add one more transform message here. So once you add a transform message, so you will get this add response. This is the output of this consume service. Add result is coming, and that is your output. Okay, so now I'll, instead of Java, I'll just put JSON, and I'm going to say this as a payload. Okay, so whatever it is coming as output of this service, we are converting that as a JSON. I'll save it. So I given an entire payload. So whatever it is there in this body add response, everything will come in a payload in a JSON format. Now I saved everything. So this is our test application, sample application. I'll just I'm starting the application now. The application is coming up now. So once we see deployed, I'll start I'll run from this Postman. I'll just give localhost 8081 and I gave the endpoint as add. I'll just double check the endpoint details here. Endpoint is add, and then we have a variable called number1, and I'll just say 20 and ampersand number2 equal to 10. So I filled both query parameter fields, and I'll just check my application has got deployed or not. So it's going to get deployed now. So once it's deployed, I'll just run it from the Postman. So it's deployed now. I'll just run it. So what will happen is our Mule app will receive this request, and internally we are calling a SOAP based web service which is there in internet. Okay, so the SOAP endpoint is here, this dneonline.com only. The calculator web service is there. There it's going to call the add operation, and where we have passed 10 plus 20 in an input, which is going to get added, and then finally it's going to sum. So you can change any value. So if I give 20 plus 13, and if I give 33, right, so it's getting added in the online web service, and we are getting a response back. So this is the response that we are getting it. SOAP is giving in a SOAP XML format, we are converting to JSON, it's coming. Okay, so this is normal SOAP based Mule application. We are consuming a Mule application, and we are invoking that from our Postman external client. So now we are going to write our NU test case in order to test this particular flow. For example, you assume you don't want to test it from external, you wanted to test within Mule, and you can create your unit testing script, so that once you created and tested using that, in future also if you wanted to test that using the MUnit test scripts, you don't need to configure anything in your Postman. You can go and simply run it from your MUnit test case. So I'm going to create a MUnit test case. So I'll just select this flow and right click and then MUnit, or you just, what you do is you just right click project MUnit run test, right? Okay, so we are not going to run test, so I'll just go to, okay, so before this you just go here MUnit and configure MUnit Maven support. So once you do that, it will add this MUnit tools packages which are relevant to MUnit. Okay, so these are the two modules which is available in MUnit tools. Okay, which is very much required in order to any MUnit create a MUnit test case or run the MUnit test case. You need this. So that's why we have done that. So it's automatically added now. So now I'll create a test case now. I'll just go to MUnit, or you select the flow, right click MUnit, create a blank test for this flow. Okay, so I'll just click that blank test for this flow. So if you see here, it's created now. So what has happened is, if you go and see here, right, this folder got created, it's src test MUnit, and that's the test case is opened here as well. So what is happening is now it's directly calling our Mule app, this test Mule app it's calling, and it will not invoke this listener. So it's, we call it as event listener, right, Mule source. So it will not invoke this one, it will invoke from the processor step. Okay, so what is happening is in the Mule MUnit test case, it's referred as a flow reference, and when it is getting called, it will go directly to this step. Directly this variable step will go, so it will skip the Mule event source, it will skip, and it will go to the processor step. So now if you see here in this sample, we are receiving a request. In our input we are getting a query parameter, number 1, number 2 we are getting from the query parameter only. So that is what we are passing it here, right? So this is the input for our service. So how do we get that input? Because when MUnit runs, it directly comes here, so we will not get this input, right? So we need to set that source in our MUnit test case. Okay, so in order to set the event, what you have to do, you have a behavior, execution, validation, right? So execution is calling your actual flow using a flow reference. So if you see here, this is nothing but you are calling your flow only. So we need to mark the data, so we need to send the test data, right, which we passed in a query parameter, because it's directly going and invoking your event processor. So what we need to do is, you have to add some behavior where you need to mark the test data for you. So what you do is you just to go and add set event, okay, or you just search set event. It's under the MUnit module and drag and drop here. So here I'm going to set the variable or the value which is required for my Mule flow. Okay, so we need that number one, number two, right? So that's the one I'm going to set. So we know it was coming in attributes, right? So we have a payload, attributes, and we have a variables, right? But this data is coming in attributes under query parameter, which we need to specify. So I'm going to set that event which can set the attribute details. So you have to go to the attributes, and here you have to set the attributes detail. Okay, so how do you do it? So you just go, so you have to select this attribute section and give specific syntax. So it will start with your data wave syntax. Okay, so you know data wave syntax will start with the hash and then square bracket, right? You give that one, and then you just give curly brace, and then you give curly brace here. So you start and end, and you know that whatever we need to get it right, that is a query param. Okay, so I'll just give query params, and you just give colon, and whatever the value it's coming, right, so you have to give it in a curly brace again, and in that we need to set the field number 1 colon and the value, right, value I'll just give 10 and comma, and I'm going to pass number 2 colon and I'll say 13. Okay, so now this curly brace started here and it's ended here, and this curly brace started here, ended here, and then finally we have a square bracket. Okay, so I'll save this one. So I have saved this one. So now what we have done is we set the attributes, okay, so which is having an input number 1, number 2, which is a query parameter, and it will, when it invokes, it will go here and it will execute the result. Okay, so how do you validate it, right? So I'll just go and for example, I wanted to validate something. So before that, I'll just try to run and see. I'm just running it here. So only thing is, when you run this one, you just stop the actual project and you start it. So once it started and successfully deployed, what will happen? It will set the mock data and it will go and invoke your flow. So once it's up, we will verify that. So internally, it will start some coverage server so that you know we can see the code coverage report. And also here you will see if there are any our unit test cases getting failed, then we will see the error here, and how much of code coverage has been executed. For example, if you have 10 steps and all the 10 complete, you have a 100% of coverage as there, and if it is something you know partially it's completed, then the code coverage will be within less percentage. So if you see here, we have executed it and you see able to see green here, right? So we had one test case and one is successful. And if you see here test Mule app, and if you say it received your request and it set the variable and transform message consume, everything got executed, and it got created generate the code coverage report as well, which showing the 100%, because it is invoking as per the flow. We don't have any condition or anything, so everything is getting executed. So now what we are going to do is I'm going to add one more step here just to validate. What has happened now is we set the requirement, we set the query parameter, it invoked the flow and everything executed successfully. The flow is end to end is working fine. But in our init case, we can validate like is that expected output, or we can validate with the actual output, actual expected output we can validate it. For example, if it is 10 plus 20 equal to 30, then I can validate that 30 here, so that we will be making we are making sure that the expected functionality is working fine. So what we have to do is I'll just use the MUnit tools where you know we have asserts, assert equals. I'll just drag and drop this one. So we have many things are there, so I'll use assert equal because I'm just going to validate some basic equal condition only. So I'll just check what is the payload I have set it in this particular flow. I just go to set event. I'm just going to double check my test data what I have sent. Attributes, I'm sending 10 13, right? So if I add this value, it should be 23. So I'll just go and add that equals, and where I need to take if it has to be in expression mode, I'm going to take from payload, and it will be there in body, and field name is add response, and field value is add result. Okay, so this is my field, and then I'm going to say expected value equal to, I'll just say 23, right? I'll just say 23 and I'll say match. I'll just give some text the message description here. and I saved it, and similar to your Mule application, if there are any changes, that will get deployed here. And if you want to run again, right, so now the changes are applied, so you have to run the MUnit test case again. I'm running it again. See here, it's 0 out of 1 now, and if it is successful, then we'll get 1 out of 1, or if there is any failure, we'll get a failure message as well here. So we are going to validate that, and if it's starting a coverage server, it runs in a port, and maybe that port is already in use or anything, then you have to use a different port, or you can go and stop the process for that particular coverage port, so that you will be able to bring up the server. So in this sample or in this exercise, right, MUnit exercise, we are just checking our flow is working as expected. If flow is failed, then we will not get the output and will not be able to validate it, right? So we are getting an output and just trying to validate it. So if you see here, test got executed and it's success, and if you have any errors, only it will come here. So there is no error is 0, right? So the unit testing is successful. So what we are seeing here is we have sent some request data which is with 10 and 13, and it going to a flow, and it's receiving the request from attributes, and it's calling a SOAP based web service, and it invoked, and then it's giving a response. That response we are validating, so everything is fine. So that's why it's giving a successful. I'll just change with some wrong condition. Okay, so I'll just give here I'll just give 25, which is wrong, right? I'll just give that, I'll save it, and I'll run it now. So now it should be now it should fail actually. So we'll see that, because our expected output, because in the input we are passing 10 plus 13, 23 should come, but actually what I'm validating is is it equal to 25, right? So we are validating that, and we'll see what is the result it's coming as part of our MUnit test result. So it's going to execute the test case now. So whatever we are using here is MUnit 2.3.1 version, and with the latest Anypoint Studio version. I'm using something around 7.7 Anypoint Studio I'm using. If you see here, it's failed because we have given a condition where we are expecting the expected value is 25. So if you see here 25, but what we are passing is 10 plus 13, right, which should be 23. So in this query parameter, what we are expecting as part of this scenario, right, or negative scenario, or whatever you call it, because I wanted to make it fail, because now 10 plus 13 equal to 23 should come. So earlier we had a 23, when it will match it will be green, right? And now I gave some condition which will not match, just to show the error. So now it is not successfully getting executed, because when you call your flow, if add operation works properly, it's supposed to send 23, but again what is coming is 25. So which might be wrong, because the assert equals is validating against 25. So if you see run 1 out of 1, error is 0 and failure is 1, right? So if we go to MUnit error, and sorry, I close this one. I'll just open again. This is again a coverage report which will show 100%, because it has executed all the steps. Okay, but again I have accidentally closed that window which has a MUnit. I'll just open that. Okay, I think I have to click the design perspective, or I'll just reset the perspective so that I'll see that. MUnit errors. Okay, so I'll show the view. So now I'll just expand this just to show the error detail. Yeah, you click this one and you click this test, and if you click it, it will show the expected is 25, but we received 23, because when your flow is giving output as 23, so it's coming as 25. So that is why this assertion is getting failed, right? So now this is the way you have to test it. So now I have used assert equals, right? Similarly, you can use assert that, where you can check the null operation or not null operation, all the stuff you can check it. So in this exercise, what we have done today, we have created a sample flow which receives a query parameter and calls a SOAP based web service. So once SOAP based web service giving a response for adding two numbers, then we have tested from the Postman to see everything is working perfectly. Then we wanted to test, other than Postman, we wanted to test from the MUnit test case. Then we have created a MUnit test case, and from there, once we created test case, we have we just calling through flow reference, because we just created a, from right click we just created automatically all the stuffs which are required, and we just added a set events to mock the data which is required as an input for this particular flow. And then once we set the mock data and once we call the actual flow, finally we wanted to validate the request, validate the response is coming as expected. So that's where we use the assert equals, and finally we are able to see the result. So we saw the successful result first, because when we gave 10 plus 20 13 and we are matching with the condition called 23, which was matching, we are getting a green. And then we wanted to make it failure, and we set that as a 25, so it's not matching, then it was failing. So just to simulate the scenario, we have tried all those stuff. And also we have seen where that MUnit error will appear here, and where we can see the coverage report. And if here everything it's getting covered, so that is why 100% it's coming. So if you have if you are in your flow, if you have many condition and some of the condition only it will work as part of that particular test case, then only 70-80% will get covered. So we need to write a more test cases to cover all the flow, so that then only it is unit tested for the all the condition. And you can check and you can see the details, like how many processors are there, how much it's tested.
Hi, thank you for watching this video so far, and if you like the content, please subscribe this Tech Lightning channel, and also please share it with your friends. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.